Hey, this is Joey from Team Antimeta. We are here for a Set 14 card reveal, and I am here with Kelly Dennis also to help me out with this card reveal. And we will be going over the card. The card is, one second, I'll show it on the screen, Black Maximum Shout. It's a very good universal card, and I have coined this card the Stat Stick because it does a little bit of everything and has a ton of text on it. Um, One of the first things you'll see about this card is it provides a good synergy with Perceptive Mastery within the instant power it has, on top of the parentheticals for the destroying and banishing. So one of the first main key features of this card is an enhancement to Perceptive Mastery. One of the other cards that I don't think gets a lot of play that this card specifically benefits is Reality Check because black does not have a lot of board hate to begin with. And the big effect of this is it basically turns Reality Check into a banished draw card, which is kind of a big deal. And it also basically interacts with any board card that is going to be in play for this. Um, I think one of the other quick, easy cards that is very beneficial to this card is Black Refusal. So you could destroy one of your own and then destroy two of theirs if you want to, and then you get to banish one and draw a card. So I think it has a lot of value. So you get to banish one, destroy one, and draw a card. That is a lot to do. Just it's going to be very dependent on your board state of what you want to actually destroy and stuff. And then I think one of the coolest interactions I think that this card has is Cooler Supernova. So basically, when entering, if you have multiple of these on the board and possibly one or two of these of supernovas in your discard pile, you can blow up a card, banish it, draw a card, and rejuve a card, possibly two, and go into a combat getting +1 or +2 life cards in your hand by going into a combat. So I think those are probably some of the easiest takeaways from this card. I think there are other beneficial benefits to this card, and I think Kelly would be a little bit better of a person to talk to about these type of benefits.
So yeah, no. So I think when we first started looking at the card, the first few things we noticed were those things. It's going to enhance Perceptive Mastery. It's going to, enhance any effects in the black style that are going to interact with the board. Things like Reality Check. Another one is Overwhelming Power. I'm not really sure if those two get played that frequently in black, but we'll kind of see how that works out. And again, Cooler was the first thing that came to, or one of the first things that came to mind, and probably the one we spent the most time talking about. But I think what I wanted to think more on is kind of how it settles into the black style as a whole. And maybe one of the first things I looked at was, okay, what kind of what tempo does it represent? And initially, it's not something that reads as an aggressive card. Initially, it's something probably a little more mid range. And not I don't know if it screams control, because we talked about Roshi and that's like my bread and butter, and I was kind of skeptical on how it'll fit in that kind of deck. So I think it's going to settle within mid range, relatively well, and that's where Cooler excels. So he's going to get a lot of natural value out of this. And then kind of thinking from there, what does black have out there? What decks are competitive? What can they do? Like where is this going to fit into? And Cooler came to mind. Tien came to mind. Roshi, Krillin, and basically any other MP that's going to be using Black Erasing Drill, because you're going to have that constant interaction with the board. And we've kind of concluded, Cooler gets the most value. It's non-interactive. You're drawing cards when you're going into combat. It really makes you kind of think twice. Do I really want to jump into this combat or not? Has a lot of really cool applications with Tien. You're already going to be milling cards. You're already banishing cards from your deck, and you're already going to be rejuving your likely perceptive, so you're blowing up the board, you're interacting there, and then the more cards you draw, the longer you're going to extend combat. So I think Cooler and Tien are probably the first two where they get the most like this natural value. And then, there is a little bit of cyclical potential here because it's not BAU. And then, the first couple people that come to mind are, Krillin and Roshi. Krillin more so just because he can, put setups back into his deck, tutor them pretty quickly. But he doesn't interact with it naturally. It's simply just what's the ceiling and can you hit that and what is that going to do for you, from game to game to game. So those are the kind of the first few thoughts. I don't think it's going to be like a landmark card in the black style. It's definitely going to enhance several decks that we had already mentioned and bring them closer to tier 1. Particularly Cooler, I think, is going to have a bit of a presence. Simply because this card generates so much value for him because Nova is such a ridiculous card. So those are kind of like my initial takeaways. And another one I did want to make sure I mentioned was the interaction with Black Shoulder Charge. If you're running a perceptive deck, you're going to throw the card, you're going to top deck a card, and your opponent's going to have to decide whether or not they want to stop that attack. Because if that attack goes through, you're going to trigger this card on the perceptive hit, and you're going to draw that card. And then the hit effect on Shoulder Charge, you'll just rejuve any card, which you could, in fact, put this back into your deck. So that interaction, play around with it, do what you will. If you were brave enough to run Perceptive Krillin, you could do some shenanigans with that. But, just an interaction I thought was, relevant to mention. But, overall, I think it's going to bring a couple MPs to the top or closer to the top. The other thing I noticed is that it has Endurance 4, which black, these mid-range, slower black decks do not have a lot of endurance. So that's a huge help as well.
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much most of everything. I just want to quickly touch on one thing. Do you think most of the power of this card comes from the instant power, or do you think just the natural power itself has a lot of value within itself?
I think it depends on the strategy of your deck. For example, if you're a deck that wants to rejuve cards and interact with your opponent's discard pile, MPs like PyCon or Cooler, or like a Vengeance Roshi, you get a little bit of value out of that, but the ceiling is pretty visible. I think so. With that said, I think the immediate effect draws the most value, no pun intended, because there are a lot of different things that you can do with it. You can it's just we've seen with Draku drawing cards. This enhances the value of whatever you want to try and do. And particularly if you're a mid-range deck, you're gonna be carrying a little bit of, a little bit of steam in the form of attack. So, you will not draw quite as dead as you would in a slower deck. So, I don't know. I think simply the potential for the ceiling on the immediate power is clearly higher than the base power. So, I think the immediate effect has a lot more going for it. Yeah, and actually, one more thing I did want to mention. Notice that we tend to overlook this right away, but notice that the immediate, and I wish I had mentioned it earlier, but the immediate interacts with any effect on either side of the board during any phase of the game. So other cards that don't immediately come to mind include Namek Ball 4. And if you have multiple of these guys out, you can trigger multiple maximum shouts on the same effect. And then you also think about what your opponent is doing. And the first few things that come to mind are like Checkup Drill Bounce with Orange Swerve or Tank Barrage. Your opponent's going to have to think twice about what cards they actually want to bounce out because they're going to end up getting banished, and then your opponent's going to draw a card. So something like it's a little spicy tech against orange decks that don't really see, a lot of adverse tech coming their way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because the key wording on the card is use N effect when a opponent's card would be destroyed in play. So it is not pertaining to either side of the board that is interacting with the card. Okay, I think that will do it for this video. I want to again say thanks for Kelly for coming on for the video, and we'll see you next set for the release.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yep, thank you, and we'll see you next set release.